Cool. It's February 24th, 2020, and my guest is John Kiriakou. John is a CIA whistleblower, or was. Oh, wait, hang on. Let's just change my view. I'm recording on John. There you go. Was, I should say, and is now a successful author and a radio show host. Hello, John.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being back. So I asked you to comment on the extradition hearings. I shouldn't say trial, I think, but hearings of Julian Assange. So let's dig into that. What's your take on what's happening here in London? I'm in London, by the way, so just so
you're in London. Okay, good. Well, day one. This is a long process. It's a very long process. Actually, it's going to stretch into July by all accounts, and there's going to be a break of at least a month in the midst of this thing, at the request of the American prosecutors, just because they say they can't remain in London for such a long stretch. They're going to have to come back here and regroup. I find that to be very odd, but I do think that the fact that it's scheduled for such a long period of time is a good thing for Julian, because it's going to give the defense, I think, ample opportunity to get a lot of facts into the record about the American prison system that otherwise would have been overlooked or ignored. I think that's a good thing.
Well, what would be the top number one fact about the American prison system that they need in then?
Well, it's what Niels Melzer has been saying, the UN Special Rapporteur for torture, that the U.S. practice of solitary confinement meets the definition of torture at the United Nations. And there's a precedent. There are actually several precedents in British jurisprudence where prisoners have been, where the courts have refused to extradite British prisoners to the United States because they would be subjected to solitary confinement. Okay. So fingers crossed.
I was not in the courtroom. I don't hold a press card, so I can't be journalist inside. So I was outside with the people protesting, and well, there were some Brits, there were some people from London, a Norwegian guy, Danish guy, me from Holland, and then the French showed up.
Yeah, I heard.
It was like 150. Well, we call them the yellow vests, and they're the heroes of the day. They arrived somewhere in the morning, and they didn't stop singing until the court was in recess, and banging the fences and everything. And that was heard also in the courtrooms. Now, I just finished talking to a member of European Parliament, Markéta Gregorova, and she's here as an observer. And she said, well, there weren't seats reserved for me as a European Parliament member, but I got in line and I was one of the first people in. I didn't know where to go. So I asked one of the security guys, and he said, well, yeah, courtroom 2. So she went there, was empty, sat down, and then she stayed sitting there until the room filled up, and she was in there. She wasn't supposed to be. But the stories he told from the courtroom is that the audio system was off. So the microphones weren't working. So even people in the room couldn't hear what the judge was saying. Now, Assange was sitting behind a plastic wall thingy, so he had trouble hearing his own court. This mess that I just described, is that common in the United States also?
No, that's not common in the United States. It's funny to me that they had him behind a plexiglass shield. The British do that for some reason, not all the time, but sometimes. That's something that's just unheard of in the United States. And in the US, even if the power were out, and I've never heard of anything like that happening, you're in such close proximity to each other that you can still hear what's going on. The handful of times that I've been in courtrooms, you didn't even really need a microphone. You're so close to one another that you can hear everything. But this, I have to say, this doesn't surprise me at all. It sounds like more of a circus sideshow than it does an actual legal hearing.
Yeah, so it's amateurism. Is that what you're saying?
That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay.
You think they would have tested the sound system at first?
On a case like this. Anyway,
Especially.
So the impression that I got is, and here's a lead up to a more serious question. You have the French and me and the other guys outside banging the fences, cheering, cheering freedom of information, cheering the right for publishers to publish, right? Cheering let Assange free. So that's the one party in this. And on the other end, you have the party that wants him extradited. And in the middle, there's the actual courtroom with Assange. Now, I would, the word victim might be out of context here, but he's sitting in the middle between those two parties with his legal team up against the American prosecutors. Now, my question to you is, who in the United States wants him extradited? End of the line.
Really, the only people, the only organization that is even talking about extradition is the U.S. Justice Department. Certainly, there's no movement among the American populace demanding the head of Julian Assange. I said in an earlier interview that at least 95% of Americans have never heard of Julian Assange. They don't follow these issues. They don't pay any attention to the news or to the case. This is an act by the U.S. Department of Justice to try to prosecute a journalist, to try to prosecute a publisher. And so that's the driving force here. It's not the American public demanding that someone pay, for example, for releasing classified information. The truth of the matter here, Rico, is that, oh, did I lose you? There you are.
Yeah, for a second.
The truth of the matter is that Julian Assange blew the whistle on American war crimes. It is illegal in this country to classify a crime. If something is a crime, by definition, it cannot be classified, and the American people have the right to know what their government is doing in their name. Yeah. Julian Assange released that information. That's a public service. It's not a crime.
So is the Justice Department, is the Justice Department then an extension of the current administration in the White House, or is that disconnected there?
Well, in a way, but in a way, most of these prosecutors are career prosecutors. They're the same people that were prosecuting cases under Barack Obama and under George W. Bush before him. So I don't think it's so much ideological as it is institutional. And it's the professional prosecutors at the Justice Department who are looking for his scalp.
Okay. Now, what I understand from the court documents is that the extradition request is based solely on what's happened in the Afghan war logs and the Iraq war logs. So the stuff Chelsea Manning leaked back in the day that was published in 2010. So why wasn't the later stuff included there? Do you think, like Vault 7, what was also through WikiLeaks?
Yeah, my guess is that they're holding that information in reserve in case they do get him here and he is somehow acquitted of the leaks in the Afghan and Iraq war logs. They have that in reserve to charge him with new crimes afterwards.
It sounds like it's personal. I'm going to ask you again, who's the person? Is there a person that has a personal issue with Assange, or is it an institutional personal thing?
I think it's institutional. I think it's the Justice Department's National Security Division. I think it's the prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia, and certainly the judges in the Eastern District of Virginia. And then you had this completely gung-ho Attorney General, now former Attorney General, in Jeff Sessions, who got the wheels moving in the first place. William Barr is not Jeff Sessions. His job is to protect the president as he sees it. And putting Julian Assange in prison, I think, is going to help with the Republican base.
Okay. Well, talk about Republican base. There's as seen from this side of the Atlantic, there's a disconnect between the DNC and the Trump group. So you say 95% of Americans may not have heard of the Assange story, but is there a similar disconnect between the other 5% and the general population, like really apart?
Yeah, there is, because there are a lot of Democrats who blame Julian Assange personally for giving us Donald Trump. They believe that his release of the DNC emails in the weeks before the 2016 election guaranteed Donald Trump's victory, and they just will not forgive him for that. Yeah,
but the previous question your answer there was, so it's the Justice Department. It's not the DNC thing that's involved in this case, right?
Yeah, well, the DNC doesn't have the authority to do something, but my point really is that Democrats ought to be Julian Assange's natural constituency here. It should be Democrats and progressives who are in the streets demanding that Julian be released. And it's not. It's not in this case. I mean, those of us who are true progressives, yes. We're the ones that in the streets. We're the ones marching to the White House and marching to the Justice Department. But run-of-the-mill Democrats, no, because they blame him for Donald Trump.
Okay. So, what was going on in Washington today? Was there any demonstration?
Yeah, there's a demonstration right now as we speak. Let me actually look to see what time it is. It's 2:00. So,
oh, sorry. Yeah, it's evening in London where I am. Okay.
Yes, it's evening in London. 2 hours ago, the demonstration began at the White House. It moved on to the Trump International Hotel. And from there, it went just another couple blocks down the street to the Department of Justice, to the Attorney General's office. They're going to continue doing that every day this week, just to keep up the pressure. And it's a variety of progressive groups and transparency groups.
Okay. Yeah. Would they identify as Democrats then, or is that not talked about?
No, actually, I know all of the speakers, and no, they don't identify as Democrats. They identify as either independents or Greens, because they believe, like I do, that the Democratic Party is so similar to and consistent with the Republican Party that there's really not much of a difference between the two.
People are thinking it might even split even after these elections. You think?
I would not be surprised by that at all.
And on the other side note, do you see Clinton coming into the game again, or no? You wouldn't hold it against her.
You know, I loathe Hillary Clinton. I think Hillary Clinton was one of the most dangerous political figures of the last generation. But the rumor is that she might agree to be vice president under Mike Bloomberg. We just have to keep our fingers crossed that we don't trade one corrupt billionaire for another corrupt billionaire. You know, I for one I love Bernie Sanders. I'm going to proudly vote for Bernie Sanders in 2 weeks. And it looks like he has enough momentum to put everybody else away. But that's not to say that the Democratic National Committee won't steal this thing from him at the Democratic Convention. Again, exactly.
How is he going to respond?
Just as an aside, looking back at 2016, Bernie Sanders won the West Virginia primary and the Colorado caucus, won handily, and didn't get a single delegate in either one of those states. Hillary Clinton got all the delegates. That's not democracy. That's theft, and it's cheating. And that's what we're afraid of happening again.
Exactly. That will be my prediction. So as seen from this side of the Atlantic, that's happening again. And that's going to be the breakup of Democratic Party. Yeah, and Trump's going to win. Anyway, another question. I just told you, I'm going to talk to, yeah, well, it's in the future, so I hope it's going to pull through. But I'm about to talk to John McAfee.
Yes.
All right. So he's the guy that invented one of the first antivirus products. Now, he claims there is no such thing as computer privacy or encryption. Everything that works has been compromised. So I believe he's taken a different approach than Ed Snowden, who says, well, if you do it properly, encryption works. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm not a computer expert, but I've been in touch with Ed Snowden and Bill Binney and Tom Drake and Kirk Wiebe and guys who are computer experts. And they tell me that if the encryption is sophisticated enough, if the key is sophisticated enough, that it can work. The danger, though, is that it's intercepted before you encrypt it. So if NSA, for example, is spying on you, or the FBI or CIA are spying on you, and they're able to target your computer as you're typing your message before you hit the encryption key, then they've got you. Yeah. And so it's far less safe and far less reliable than most people realize, I think.
So only a week or 2 weeks ago by now in the news, was that a Swiss company, Crypto AG?
Right.
You got that story?
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, I'm asking a former CIA employee, but did you know about that back in the day? Was this common? No?
No, this was highly classified, highly compartmentalized. I was in a senior position at the CIA, and I had no idea. I gave an interview about this last week to a Russian network, and it was really one of the funniest interviews I've ever given. And I didn't mean for it to be funny. But this woman was asking me very loaded questions, like, is anybody going to be prosecuted for this? And I said, no, but I think several people will probably win medals for it. This was a wildly successful operation. It's not viewed as a crime. It's viewed as something heroic and patriotic. And she said, but it's not honest to do something like this. And I said, no, it's intelligence. It's an intelligence operation. It's not supposed to be honest. It's not supposed to be fair. It's not supposed to make for a level playing field. This is something that intelligence services do all around the world.
Yeah, but still, it is supposed to be in the general public interest, or not? I mean,
Says who?
Yeah, me. I mean,
Yeah,
why else are we spending?
You're wrong.
Why else are we spending our tax money on it then?
Well, this is in the public interest.
Yeah.
It's in the U.S. public interest for the CIA to crack the codes of every other country in the world. Very much in the public interest.
Yeah, so I'm here. The reason that I'm here is like soul searching for the soul in United Kingdom, in London, in the activists here who shows up, in the journalists who show up, politicians, and to see if Assange has any chance at all on a fair trial. And then the microphones don't work on day one, and somebody walks.
And then the microphones don't work. Yeah.
So
one thing I'm worried about too, is let's say that the judge denies the U.S. government's request to extradite Julian. That's going to be seen as a huge victory. But then what happens? Julian is an Australian citizen. He just recently, in the last year or so, had his Australian passport renewed. So he has a current passport. If he's then expelled from the United Kingdom and sent to Australia, the U.S. will just ask the Australians to extradite him. It would be so much better if he were allowed to leave for Russia, or if there were a country that would be willing to provide him with asylum, because I don't think that he would be safe if he wins and he's expelled to Australia.
How? I don't know the United Kingdom legal system, but if you don't get extradited, you don't get expelled, do you? I mean, you're just an Australian.
Sure you do. Sure you do, because he's not a British citizen. He doesn't have a right to remain in Britain.
No, doesn't he have the right to choose his own plane on which he leaves?
I would hope so. That's really the big question. I would hope so.
So he's
unless they escort him to the airport and just put him on the first plane to Melbourne or Sydney.
France, maybe. I mean,
that would be great.
I heard he requested asylum there.
Yeah, I heard the same thing.
Okay, last question that I have for you. I prepared for you. You're familiar with a software product called Securedrop, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not, and I still don't know the workings of it exactly, but on a higher level, if you're a whistleblower and you have some stuff that you want to expose to media, you would volunteer it to Securedrop, and that mechanism would land it to the media without there being connection between me and the material that I'm leaking, right? That's Securedrop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you go to various media outlets in the United States, you go to the websites, you might find Securedrop on there as one of the means to get information to them.
Yes.
Okay. I got that right. And it was built, among others. Assange was one of the people getting that system working.
Correct.
Aaron Swartz was on there. So these would be the totally independent people trying to get that system to work. Okay, my question is, there's another product as well. And that was Wikileaks. That's also a software product that was adopted, maybe among other parties, but by a Dutch organization, Publeaks. Publeaks is using the global leak software and does the same thing that I just described. Have you heard about Publeaks before?
No, this is the first time I've heard of it.
Okay. Well, my question to you is, if you find the time and you know people, I want to know if I can, how I should weigh Publeaks as compared to Securedrop.
Oh, most definitely. Bill Binney and Tom Drake could give you a detailed answer on that.
I will connect.
Either one of them.
I'm going to connect to them.
Excellent.
Okay. There was one last thing. I forgot to write it. Oh yeah. Before I hang up on this phone. In the Netherlands, we have a law that's called, in Dutch, Huis van Klokkenluiders, home of whistleblowers. Now that law sounds really great, like some laws tend to do. So that's like a safe place built into law where whistleblowers can go so they don't have to leak to the press. How cool is that? We don't need the fourth estate because in the safe and secure house of whistleblowers, all things are, and you even get some kind of whistleblower certificate, like you're a real one, so you're protected. Yeah, right. Like a former Secret Service person in the Netherlands is on their board. That kind of an organization. So they're about to evaluate that law and how it functions. And well, it doesn't really function that well. My question to you, if you were to build an NGO, and if you would get a law in that would fund that NGO through tax money, let's just dream that would be reality someday. Who would be the people deciding on who's on the board of such NGO? How would we get a board and an organization protecting whistleblowers and their rights so that it's not corrupted?
Well, actually, such an organization already exists. It's called Blueprint for Free Speech. It's based in Australia, and the board members are mostly academics, and some of them are transparency and privacy activists. I've worked with them for years, and they've been able to write draft legislation, draft whistleblower protection legislation, and market it around the world. So they hired me in 2015 to help the Greek government write a new whistleblower protection law. We wrote it in 2015. It was finally passed into law in 2018, and then a version of it was adopted by the European Parliament for implementation in the European Union. It's not perfect, of course, because it had to go through so many different layers of amendments and writing and rewriting, and it had to be approved by all the different countries. Yeah. But they've had success in places like Canada and Zambia and Jamaica and Ukraine, pushing this whistleblower protection legislation. It's hard work, and it's a very long and drawn out process, but it actually works in the end in most places that are serious about that kind of legislation.
Well, the I was going to say the European Union, they're not so united as they'd like to be, but no. European Union has a whistleblower directive. That thing is supposed to be passed into law in the various member states.
Yes.
It's watered down, right? So that what's what you're looking at also. One of the jurisdictions that it does not apply to is Brussels itself. So
nice.
Like it works for the United States, but not for Washington. That kind of a whistleblower.
And that's how every piece of legislation is here. Congress is automatically exempt from coverage. Like, for example, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Congress doesn't have to observe any of it. They exempt themselves from coverage.
Same thing all over. But okay, you were involved with the thing from Australia, and I'm definitely going to research into that.
Yep.
To your knowledge, were they involved in any way with the Dutch law or evaluation that's taking place now?
I don't know, but I can tell you that the founder and director of Blueprint for Free Speech is Dr. Soulette Dreyfus, who was the co-founder of Wikileaks with Julian.
I will definitely...
She's very serious about transparency.
Okay. You've given me fantastic information, John. Great to talk to you again.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make.
You think I'm joking? Predator drones. You will never see it coming.
Laat staan dat ik kan ingaan over vuur.